Hello everyone, welcome to yet another edition of the Youth Roundtable. Today is the 4th day of this week, the 5th day of this month, and the 5th day of this year. Yet we are here again for another discussion. So without further ado, allow me introduce my panel. In fact, allow me ask them to introduce themselves, then I'll introduce the topic, and then we start the discussion. So let's begin with the gentleman at the extreme end.
Thank you very much, my good friend and comrade Godwin Toko, and our moderator. To the viewers, good afternoon. My name is Kidega Moses. I'm the Secretary for Labor and Works of the National Youth Council. I'm also a resident panelist at the Youth Roundtable. I'm happy to be here once again, and a happy new year to you, our dear viewers.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. My name is Namakula Mariam. I'm a law student at Islamic University in Uganda, Kampala campus. I'm also the deputy speaker there. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much, Toko, for hosting me.
You're welcome.
My name is Welunga Yusuf. I am the president of Uganda National Students Association, call it UNSA. I happen to be a student of law at Islamic University in Uganda, main campus. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good afternoon, dear viewers. Compliments of the season. I'm Marian Kyazike. I work with Experian, Uganda CRB Limited. It's a credit reference bureau, and we work with the financial institutions that are regulated by Bank of Uganda and help these institutions manage credit risk within the financial sector. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to the panelists. So when the president addressed the nation sometime in November or December, he said he would fully open up the economy only in January, and he made that unconditional, saying whether or not you people choose to get vaccinated, the economy will be opened in January. And when it was announced that that speech would be made on the 31st of December, we eagerly waited and watched to hear what he would tell us. Indeed, he came, of course he came late, but he came and said a couple of things. And of the things he said, first he opened schools and said that schools should commence on the 10th of this month, January. And then he also opened the transport sector and said they can go back to carrying people at full capacity. That is the taxis, the buses, and I think there's a train that moves up to somewhere in Namave. It can also carry people at full capacity, or even if there's a boat that had been observing SOPs, they can now carry people at full capacity, provided the people are fully vaccinated and prove that with the evidence of a vaccination certificate or card. And then he said curfew would be lifted. He said clubs, nightclubs, the ones that have been off for 2 years, will also be opened, but 2 weeks from the time when schools resume. Then someone asked why he's experimenting with the children instead of letting the drunkards first get into it so that we could see how it turns out. But then someone else said that what if the parents drink the school fees? Should have taken their kids back to school. So where we stand today is that we have schools open. We have most of the economy open, except for borders. It says borders are still going to observe their dusk to dawn curfew, 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. Borders will only operate illegally. Yeah, unlike except when they operate in the circumstances that he had enunciated earlier. So it's that speech. In fact, it's the idea, it's his words that he put forward on opening the economy that we're here to discuss and look at today. So without wasting any more time, let me first begin with Yusuf. Yusuf is the president of the Uganda National Youth Council, Uganda National Students Association, UNSA. Sorry for that. So I want to understand from you, Yusuf, the opening of schools. Yeah, when the president said schools are open, how did you receive that message? Did you become happy? Do you think we are prepared for schools? Do you think, given the fact that we have Omicron raining havoc, not just in this country but around the world, that we are ready and this was the right time to make such a speech?
Well, thank you, moderator. On behalf of the students of the country, when the president came out and said, I've allowed schools to open on 10th January, we were very excited and happy because we believe that the effects of COVID-19, the negative ones, have been highly felt by my constituency, the students I'm talking of. We experienced that most of our female students, they have become mothers at very tender age. Some of them have even lost lives because they couldn't sustain what they had inside. Some male students also decided to engage in some business ventures. Some of them may not be healthy onto them. And we realized that once, you see, when the education sector is a bit affected, it affects the whole generation. It affects the development of the country and the economy of the country, because every developed country, there is an education factor that helped it develop. So we realized that we as students were being affected highly. So once the president came out and opened the schools, it is really a bit relieving. You also see that some of our fellow students had developed some mental complications. Some of the students don't know what is next. Some of them don't think they should get back to school because they are now used to the life they have been going in. You see, I always follow TikTokers. There are some businesses that are going on TikTok. But if you happen to follow, you see that most of our fellow youth had become idle. And this really, I see it is affecting the entire country at large. So we're very happy for the president opening this. Maybe I have a question as a person. We are going back to school. Are we going to, shall we not experience the other first experience we had last time? They opened, they closed.
Yeah.
Shall this one not again happen? As students leaders through UNSA, we are looking forward of not again having the closure of the schools as it happened. We are running a campaign called Keep Schools Open and Safe. And in this campaign, as UNSA, we are engaging the students, leaders, to be on the forefront, to establish COVID task force teams in their schools. We are engaging the Ministry of Health, requesting it to educate the medical students on how they can do antigen testing in schools, so that they are in a position to do rapid and regular testing in schools. Once we detect someone who might be having some symptoms of COVID-19, is isolated, tested, if is proved to be positive, can be taken aside and is treated, not based on 2-3 cases to close the entire education sector, as you saw what happened the other time.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to Kidega. I'll begin with the gentleman, then come. I'll disobey that ladies first and make the ladies last. So Kidega, today the lead story in today's New Vision talks of the inspection that was done of schools, and says that a number of schools were found to be not fit for opening. Some are actually permanently closed, especially the private schools, including some very established schools. They will never open again. Do you think this was the right time to open the schools? Or perhaps it's now 5 days to Monday when schools should open. Or perhaps you should have spent more time, first of all, trying to make the schools more ready, making the students readying them for school, the teachers and all the people that are involved in the education sector. Do you think that the idea that the government just said, oh, we're opening them on the 10th, then making the inspection later and then finding so many schools not worthy of opening, do you think that was the right decision to take?
I think first and foremost, the opening of schools was quite long overdue. So I think schools should have opened yesterday. But you see, like my comrade Yusuf said, that schools and the education sector entirely fits into the ecosystem of the economy at large. And to that respect, just allow me speak about the economy precisely. I am not an economist by training, but I will attempt to borrow some knowledge from a Yale economist called David Welch. David Welch, in his attempt to describe global economics, said that most of these developing economies or developing countries, where I believe Uganda falls, run or experience what he called a dual economy. And in his attempt to explain this, he said that a dual economy is where you have a group of very few but extremely rich people that control the factors of production, meaning they have access to land, they have access to capital, they can afford to hire highly skilled labor, and they therefore participate in the global market and benefit from the global trade. And this in Uganda accounts for maybe about 15% of the country's population. Then you have this other side of Ugandans who are about 85%, who are most times experiencing what you'd call they are highly in the rural areas of the country. They don't participate in the global market entirely. And these are the farmers, these are the informal sector players. So to me, I think opening schools was a very timely action to take as a country, because schools, like I said, fits into the entire ecosystem of the economy. Because you know that when schools are open, they need, for example, raw materials like chalk to teach. They need things like food materials. They need things like teachers need to be paid. So there's a whole ecosystem benefiting from the opening of schools. So I think it was a timely gesture, and yeah, I applaud the government, but I think also it was long overdue. Yeah.
Okay, so you haven't talked about the fact that I asked you that were we ready for opening schools now?
The issue of
The economy is very important. We
Mm.
all agree, yeah. But looking at the schools as schools, yeah,
Mm.
you know that very many schools are not opening. Should government probably have stepped in, given them some relief to ensure that they continue in business? Should government have come in to help the parents? The government issued a statement saying that there should be no increment of school fees, and we already have overwhelming evidence that very many schools have actually defied that and they have increased school fees.
I think first and foremost, we can never be 100% ready
Mm.
for anything, be it opening of schools, be it whatever case it is. We can never be 100% ready. But we must simply be able to start from somewhere. So about being readiness, certainly, like Comrade Yusuf said, we might not be very ready.
If,
Both,
on a scale of 1 to 100, where are
Um,
we? Is it 10%, 20%, or 90% ready?
I think we are about 70% ready
Okay.
to open schools and then to resume schools, because majority of the work that needs to be done is on mindset change. Like you were saying, the children who feel that now education isn't important to them, how can we have psychosocial programs to rehabilitate them to go back to school? The parents who feel that, I mean, after all, my children haven't been going to school and are still here anyway. How do we have psychosocial programs for them so that they can appreciate the fact that they need to go back to school? But also, like you said, government needs to come in to offer maybe subsidies in terms of utilities like electricity, water, so that schools can lower their cost of production. Therefore, they aren't pushed to the extremes to increase tuition or to increase school fees in that regard.
Okay, let's move to Miriam. Mental health and the opening of these schools. These students have been home for this while. He's mentioned the aspect of the abuse, yeah, that some of the girl children have gone through, the defilement, yeah. People have to say that, oh, they got pregnant. That is not that is the effect of the defilement, yeah, where the problem came from. We've heard that so many children are subjected to child abuse. Some of them engage in child labor, things that hitherto schools used to protect them from. So how does this affect them? I know that you do some work with mental health. Yeah. How does it affect their mind? And how does that impact on them if they go back to school? Are we going to have children that are performing better? Are they going to perform less than they should be, below optimum, given their mental state of the state of their mind at the moment? How do you look at that from the mental health perspective?
Okay, when the government opened schools, remember we have been in lockdown for literally 2 years. So you're going to find that most of the students who have been home are not going to be able to go back to school, especially those who have been facing violence, gender-based violence, those ones who got pregnant during the lockdown. They would want to go back to school, but then they're going to be stigmatized because a girl would be like, I've given birth, how can I go back to school? How are people going to see me? And the fact that, remember, girls grow faster than boys. So some of them are even going to feel that they are a little bit older for the class that they're in. However, I think, okay, the government opened schools, but then they have not put in place some incentives, as in ways to try and help these people, most of the students who have been home, as in to prepare them mentally to go back to school. For example, the girls who got pregnant during the lockdown, at least if there are some programs to help them, to prepare them to, like, encourage them so that they can go back to school, prepare them mentally, so that they can feel comfortable when they go back to school,
Okay,
yeah.
so if government hasn't done that, what of the other stakeholders? Yeah, I know several NGOs that are engaged in mental health rights. Mental Health Uganda, there's Free Mind Hive somewhere in Namugongo. So does it behoove them to fill this void that is being left behind by the government, or you think they don't have the capacity to do that, or the timing, or the government actually has not involved them enough?
Okay, I'm sure they're trying to do their best, but then the government is a big stakeholder in this, because they're supposed to also encourage and, you know, talk to the schools that they can allow also these girls to go back to school. Like girls who are also pregnant during this period, the government should encourage the schools that the girls can be taken in, of which most schools would not allow such a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move to May. You have something to say?
Yeah, maybe to supplement on what my sister is saying. Recently, you saw the Office of Minister of Education launching a program of end teenage pregnancy. And some of the things they discussed were to encourage students to get back to school, more so those who have been affected by the lockdowns. However, I should as well urge the students' leaders in their respective institutions to run campaigns of ending stigmatization which may arise to these students. I believe every university may be having a counselor. Let now the office of the counselor work. Let the office work closely with the students' leadership to talk to these students, not to abuse their fellow students who might have become baby mothers in the lockdowns. I believe these campaigns as well may also add something.
Funny that you mentioned that campaign by the Ministry of Education. There's something else they said, but I don't know if you made it by mistake or they said that if a boy makes a girl pregnant and the girl is out of school, they'll ensure that the boy also stays out of school for the period the girl stays out of school. Do you think that's a very practical or a good solution to such a problem? Would less boys make girls pregnant, knowing that if I made a girl pregnant, a school girl pregnant, I'm going to stay home for as long as she stays home?
I really not buy that idea, because me, I believe a good a girl child who is good is as good as a male child. We should not prioritize the other at the expense of the other. Rather, if there is a problem, we should look at how do we fix this problem? How do we assist the affected party? How do we assist the victim? Not to keep the other, because if you keep all at home, the family will have issues in the long run. Imagine a home where a mom and a dad, they are all illiterate. What will be the impact on their children? So I think it shouldn't be that way. If it happens at all, we should support the other party who is willing to go back to school. But at the same time, we should also encourage the sister, when she gets well, to get back to school.
Okay. Let me move to May. We shall get back to that. May, Kidega tried to eat what I had reserved for you. He tried to eat into your food. So I wanted us to talk about the economy with you, you being the economist. A lot of youths had taken their trade online. A lot of people are now selling stuff online. His friend Maki likes to sell jewelry online, necklaces, whatsoever. And a lot of youths have done that. We've seen a lot of very innovative youths doing businesses, selling shoes. You go to Facebook and there's a couple of people advertising for shoes and all these things. Now that the economy is open again and we are going back to normal, at least for the foreseeable future, if we don't have another wave that puts us back down. Do you think those youths stand to lose in this? Or do you think that, economically speaking, they are both going to thrive? That the traditional economy of I go to a shop with 10,000 and I buy a kilogram of sugar, and then Maki, who is selling her necklaces online, that both of them can survive after now that the lockdown has come to an end?
I think, the world works with trends, and the current trend right now is digital. So, irrespective of the fact that the economy has opened up, there are advantages with doing business digitally that people have actually realized, as compared to traditionally having a shop, paying rent, incurring transport to go to work, sitting all day and you don't get a customer, and yet there is a cheaper way of doing it online. Yeah, but also at the same time, you need to ask yourself how many people have got access to Instagram, to Snapchat, to WhatsApp, to actually support these youths who have gone with this trend. So for me, I think it's two-way. There are advantages to it, and I think people should practice both. If you can grow digitally, have a digital outreach, and also grow a physical business enterprise, it works for you. If it works for you, go for it. And therefore, there are certain places where digital will never work. There are certain kinds of businesses where digital would never work. So I think it's a two-way street. Jump on that trend if it works for you, irrespective of whether the economy has opened or not. If it works for you, go for it. If it doesn't work for you, you're going to opt for the traditional approach since the economy has opened up and it's more supportive. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think the Ugandan economy, looking at the macro economy,
Yeah.
the whole country's economy, do you think it will ever fully recover? And how long do you think it will take to recover now that things seem to be getting back to normal, yet there's still that uncertainty of whether or not we shall finish this year without another lockdown?
So in terms of recovery and economic growth, there are definitely challenges and uncertainties. With the pandemic itself, there are certain things you do not see. I mean, right now, I was reading on my phone that there is another variant that has been discovered in France. So there's so many uncertainties that are going to hinder growth with time. But in terms of recovery, I see hope for recovery. First of all, as a country or African countries, we adopted this whole lockdown initiative and did not think through whether it actually really will suit us and maybe make it very practical to ourselves. So we are suffering because of some of those things or those decisions that we took. But now the all African countries are open to opening up their economies fully. And with this, I think that when the economy opens up, there is more supply, there's more demand. Private sector thrives when the economy is open, unlike when it's locked. Now they've opened up the night economy. I mean, it's going to...
Save for borders.
Yeah, boost the economic growth. I mean, they work during day at the same time. Like there are certain reasons the president put, I think we may all know them, as to why borders are being stopped. But I mean, opening up the economy will definitely push economic growth. But the uncertainties will have to push back sometimes and push forward. But as long as the economy keeps open, I definitely see room for growth in the economy.
Okay. Just to supplement about the economy. Like I said, I am not an economist by training, but I've read a book by David Welch. David Welch is a Yale University economist. David Welch, in his attempt to describe African economies, said that the economies of Africa, in his own words, he said they are a dual economy. It is cut into two. You have this other side of very few people, about 15% of the country's population. They are very rich, and they control the factors of production. But our young people fall in the 85% that are semi-skilled. Usually they are the ones being employed to work as laborers or to work in the mines, or they are the farmers in any case. And they don't participate or benefit from the global market and foreign trade at all. So that is one way to look at the economic structure of Uganda. But also there is a question of whether our economy as a country is more of a socialism economy or it is a capitalistic economy. I think as a country, there are still pocket cases where we see socialism as a driving force towards economic development. And this is mainly in the rural areas, that you have people who in their community still farm together, they harvest the proceeds together, they look for the markets together, and they by all means share the profits and dividends together. So there is still some socialism in the rural areas, but largely Uganda is a semi-capitalistic economy where you have the forces of demand and supply dictating or influencing the market prices. And government has very limited interventions in terms of setting market prices and in terms of influencing, how demand and supply runs. But also we know that our economy is a highly privatized economy, that the social services of education, of healthcare, of telecommunication, of electricity are majorly being run by the private players. So what this means is that the consumer runs a risk of exorbitation or of exploitation in cases where the producers are trying to harness or make the most profit from their producers. So it's a tricky economy for us to be able to confidently anticipate, because if you have an economy where the private sector is trying to make the most profit and government isn't doing so much to influence in terms of setting market prices, but at the same time, the same private sector is choking on debt. So many small, medium enterprises have closed, okay, because of COVID-19. And there was a World Bank report that was released last year around June, which clearly stipulated that our economy, whereas it was growing in a very progressive manner in the early 2015, around there, to a tune of about 7% per annum, it's now at about 3% or 2%. And it's bound to even shrink or to even reduce. So the economy is struggling, and there is so much that needs to be done for us to be able to jumpstart the economy and to put it on a path of clear trajectory for the benefit of every Ugandan.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me shift to Miriam. You're a student as of now. So how did COVID-19 affect your education? How did it affect your progress? Where were you supposed to be at this time or by the end of last year, and where are you now? Based entirely on COVID and the repetitive lockdowns.
Okay. Fast forward, COVID-19 affected, okay, not only me, but even other students, you know, when we come to financially, you know, because our parents have been working, they've been paying for our tuition. Maybe because of the pandemic, they've been sitting down, meaning in fact, most of them have not been able to pay for their children's school fees. So, you know, when you look at universities, in fact, when we open to go back to do exams, some of the students are even taking a dead year. So, you know, the pandemic has really affected students so much because most of them have been facing financial struggles. They've not been able to pay their tuition, and then you cannot do the exams, you know, without paying the tuition. So I think that's a really very, very, very big problem, because even if schools have been opened, they may be open, but then you're going to find that some students are not going to be able to go back to school because of the different financial, you know, difficulties that their parents have been facing.
And then you, like, in terms of your progress, which year were you supposed to be in? Where are you right now?
Okay, right now I'm in year 4, but if it wasn't for COVID, I would be done basically. Basically.
You'd be at LDC.
Yes.
Okay, now I'll conclude with the UNSA president, the UNSA president, just before we go for the break. So was it necessary to keep schools closed for this long? Some people have argued that, I mean, there are reports that I don't know if they have been authenticated that say that Uganda had the longest closure of schools, not just in the East Africa or on the continent, but in the world.
80 weeks of closure.
Yeah, that we had that very long closure of schools. We seem not to be the most affected by COVID. Yeah, even those who are more affected seem to have opened up a bit earlier. And then there's evidence that suggests that school children, yeah, young people, are not as much affected by COVID as the older people. And Uganda seems to have almost over 75% of its population just below the threshold of the people that were most devastated by COVID in terms of their physical health, that like personally, forget the economy and everything else. So was it necessary that the government closes schools for this long, that even up to now they are closed and they can only open 5 days from now?
Well, thank you, moderator. It was necessary in the first lockdown, in the first, when we experienced the virus, because it was new. None of us had an idea about it. And to safeguard our population, we took a very good decision of closing the schools. However, I personally believe would have used the first lockdown to study the whole situation. How best can we reopen the economy? Can we reopen the schools and ensure that our students are safe in schools? What do we need to do? It was everyone's responsibility. It was a responsibility of the schools to appreciate this. It was a responsibility of an individual, of a parent, of the government, and so on and so forth. But you realized that we did not study anything in the first lockdown. That explains as to why, when they opened, again, they had to reclose the schools. In the second lockdown, I believe it wasn't necessary to close the learning institutions, because you realized that students, when they're at school, they are more safer when they're at home. We've seen the number of raising of teenage mothers. They have raised because they have been at home. Most of the parents have been crying, when should schools open and students get back? It is in these lockdowns we've had that we've seen some schools going on with studies, producing half-baked learners. There are some universities I know that made the teachers who are doing education, students, to do school practice amongst themselves. because there were no schools open, they couldn't go outside and do their school practice. So they were doing school practice within that very class. I believe there is some element they were missing. We've seen that there are some engineers, they have not been studying at all, because you cannot study engineering online, because this is a practical related course. So that backlog has also been there. You see, you have a lot of senior ones who were there, the lot of senior ones who passed PLE recently. There are those who also, they have grown up, they're in P7, they wish to leave primary and join. So you see, we had a lot of things. I believe the second lockdown, to me, it wasn't necessary, because you saw even UNEB became a bit frustrated. Should we release results? But if we release results, because the culture is once we release results, school should open and students should go back to school. But they were releasing results, nothing was happening, and students were asking themselves, we've got our results, so what next? Everyone was asking, what next? What next? So I believe the second closure, or in the lockdown, I mean in the second closure of schools in the second lockdown, it wasn't really necessary.
Let's hold it there, Yusuf. Dear viewers, thank you very much. That's the first segment of our discussion. We are going to come back and have a second session. That will be our final segment for today. But I want to thank the panelists once again for this particular segment, and I want to implore you to always watch this series. We have them weekly. Turn on your notification so that once and subscribe. Turn on notification and subscribe so that when videos are uploaded, when there's a discussion happening, you can always be notified and you can join in real time and watch with us. Thank you. Let's first have this break and then we'll come back for the second segment. Welcome back, our esteemed viewers. I hope you enjoyed the first segment. So we're here to give you the second and the final segment for today's discussion. And we are going to continue with the same topic. That topic that talks about the reopening of the economy, the reopening of schools. But from the youth perspective, how does this feel? Should they be optimistic? Is this a mirage? Is the excitement going to be one that is short-lived? That's all that we're discussing today. So let me now move to May. And May, if we have another variant. There seems to be a couple of variants coming up nowadays, every now and then. So just in case we have another variant, somewhere like in March or in June of this year, and the president is pushed, he's handicapped, he cannot do anything but to close again. So how would you expect him to close this particular time? Are there sectors you think that we can do with despite a closure, or it should be the normal way that he has been closing all along? Speaking from an economist's perspective.
First of all, I think we should definitely have the expectation that more variants are going to come up from time to time. So this is something we need to start getting used to. Yeah. In terms of closure, we've all seen the repercussions of closing the economy fully and how it has affected everyone else. So I would not advise them to use the same approach. I think it can be approached in a different way. For example, like the curfews, you know, what's the relevance of telling people stop moving at 7 and then they crowd up during the whole day? So I think we'll need to definitely revise. Like I said, the copy and paste of what's being done in the European countries and those other bigger economies does not work in the smaller underdeveloped economies like ours. So we need to definitely take a more practical approach, more researched approach. I was going to say we need to consult the experts, but that word experts these days is, but we need to consult people on ground and understand what better ways can we go in terms of curbing the repercussions of the variants and the pandemic, while ensuring that the economy thrives throughout this period. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move to Yusuf. There are those that have accused the government of creating a groupthink in the management of COVID-19, where you will have ministers, permanent secretaries, and the president, a very, very exclusive and a privileged class of Ugandans. So they are going to take decisions on how borders should operate. They are going to take decisions on how markets should operate. They are going to take decisions on how schools should operate. So do you think this COVID should have been managed better? If, for instance, government had on the management committee someone that can represent the students, a student leader or student leaders, maybe like UNSA having representative there, and then maybe for the other sectors, border borders, if we had someone that has an idea of what border borders actually feel, and how best they can be managed while ensuring that the fatalities or the cases of COVID are kept as low as possible, but the economy and the impact or the repercussions that the closures have on the border borders, the students and all these other people are also minimized. So do you think the missing link in all this is the fact that there's just a small exclusive group of very privileged people from the same, who think alike, old men, employed driving government cars, government fuel and all that, that has been part of the problem that has led to the failures in management of this pandemic?
Partly contributes to that. You see, when COVID came, some people turned COVID into an economic venture. So they decided to hide in the fight of COVID-19, yet in the actual sense, they were making a lot of money out of this. And you know, when you are stealing, you not want to be discovered that you were stealing. So such people couldn't welcome others. But however, I also believe that our leaders, the members of parliament, the one we send, they were not there for the population. You remember during the other lockdown, people were suffering, MPs were busy dashing money amongst themselves. So they were not concerned about the population. But I believe had the government involved every person in the fight of COVID-19, it would have been better. Remember when the president called for donations in the first lockdown, even a student was in a position to donate something, because people had decided to fight COVID-19 as one person. But what went wrong made people not to start embracing or working together with this. So I believe the government would have, and if in case, God forbid, another variant comes up, should now involve people in the discussions concerning how better we can manage COVID-19. If you're to look into the transportation sector, have people who matter in this sector. Can you call those who head border borders, those who head taxis, those who head buses on a table and seek for their advice? Because for them, they're in the system. They know how best they can fight this. If you're to look at schools, have the students leader, if possible, have UNSA, because it is the association for the students, have its leadership, consult it, even if they are young, but they know how best it can be. Involve the head teachers in this, and I believe it can give ways of how effective we can fight this. Now recently, I heard the president saying border should stop operating at 7. To me, as a student, I welcome this, but to a large extent, I believe it shouldn't be, because we have students who are on evening programs. You have opened the schools. There are students who move long distances to come for schools, and the only transportation means they can afford at the borders, and they finish maybe their class at around 10 p.m., others at around 9 p.m. You expect this student to walk all this long distance getting back home just walking? So I believe the president should rethink of how best can I adjust in the time of when should borders stop operating. 7 p.m. to me as a student and as a student's leaders, I believe it is not favoring us. Then too, you see, they have also opened the transportation means that they should operate full board. But you see, because of failure to involve those who matter in this business, you see there is a very big gap. The minister the other time yesterday came and said there shouldn't be increment in the transportation fares. Just spoke that. But in the actual sense, it is not being done. They are still overcharging us, provided the minister said something. So we believe that the minister of works, this is a high time to come up and make a serious directive as regards to this effect. Because if it continues being high, yet you have opened full board, you are doing a disservice to us the students, because imagine a student who goes to school using a public means on a daily basis is paying 10,000 on a daily basis. Really, will a student be in a position to matter this? So coming back to your question, I believe there was no involvement of other people in the management of COVID-19, which I believe was a necessity to have them in this.
Let's move to Kidega. I'm going to skip Mariam. Now, the president said that all the SOPs are going to be observed. Said when they open the nightclubs, you go there and you have your mask, you have your sanitizer, they check your temperature, and then you enter and dance. Said, but for the public transport, they've said that unless you're fully vaccinated, then you shouldn't be using a taxi, you shouldn't be using a bus, a boat, or whatever. The last time the president made such a proclamation was when he said borders should have a notebook, register names, where you're going, your telephone contact, and everything. Even I don't know if you mentioned blood group, but I remember by then I was still living in Chikoni, and only one border rider once carried me. It was a safe border. So I asked him that, how come you're not taking my information? He said, oh, I'll get them from the application. The application will give me all the information that I need. Now, no other border ever asked me for that. The border that brought me here today has not asked me. But you know that the president has never recalled that order. Has not said that, okay, now you can carry without registering. So how practical are these SOPs that the president keeps talking about? Yeah. Even going back to schools, how practical is it that they're going to expect schools to have sanitizers, to have face masks for students and all that? Yet these schools are also being told, don't increase tuition in these circumstances.
Thank you, Comrade Godwin. To me, this goes back to the social construct of our society as a people. That you have a society that is, like I mentioned earlier on, there is a high level of privatization. Most of these secondary and primary schools, their major interest is profit making. They don't care so much about really things around, for example, health, or things around maybe whatever other issue that could arise. Their interest is how best can we make the most money from these pupils. So by all means, they are going to be hesitant towards investing, for example, in things like buying sanitizers, in things like buying maybe jerry cans, so that students can be able to wash their hands everywhere, things like procuring masks for students. They are definitely going to be hesitant towards taking some of these initiatives because of what I mentioned earlier on. Their major interest is to make profit. But also, you see, for an economy like Uganda that is struggling, that you have majority of the people benefiting more from the informal sector than the formal sector, it becomes extremely impractical for us to expect that the same people who cannot afford education, the same people who cannot afford food can afford to spend money in things that over time has proven to be a luxury. Because because if I'm vaccinated as a teacher, why then should I be extremely stringent about some of these SOPs? So there is a general level of complacency in the population, which is of course derived by so many reasons. But I think majorly because they feel they're vaccinated now, so their safety is now sort of guaranteed. But to me, this speaks to still the general challenge that we have as a people, that because we took so long to reopen the education sector, I don't know how many teachers are willing to go back to school, more so now that they've been able to explore other lucrative ventures like maybe selling chapatis and things like that. Because as a matter of fact, so many of our teachers have resorted into doing other things that earn them money. So there is a whole need for us as a people, because I have had us putting most of these challenges to the government. But I think COVID-19, where it has reached, we all have a role to play. Government has a role to play. The citizens have a role to play. The parents have a role to play. And also you as a learner, you have a role to play. Because at the end of the day, if COVID attacks you as an individual and you die, the government will not be liable for your death. It will be you as an individual, and you would have died by then. So I think the people must reevaluate themselves at a personal level and look at themselves as, my life has to really matter in all this. But moving forward, about the readiness of these institutions, I was reading today, I think in New Vision or something, where a survey was done in Jinja by the local government, and about over 10 schools confessed that they will not be opening. So that is the predicament that parents are going to have to face in the forthcoming week. That you'll have schools that are no longer operating. Some have ever since become hotels, have become clubs have become other things. So it's a whole predicament that we're going to face as a people. But by and large, there is hope at the end of the day that at least our students are going to go back to school and they'll be able to continue from where they stopped.
So just still staying with you, of all the things the president opened, which one excited you the most? Which one are you missing the most? Is it the club? Is it the school? And you'll have to be a bit honest on this
Yeah.
particular question.
I think to me, my heart goes out to the vast majority of Ugandans who benefit from the informal sector and from the night economy. Because, for example, many of our young people who work in these bars and in these hotels and in these saunas were somehow cut short of their sources of revenue. And still my heart goes out to those students who pay for themselves tuition and have to work in the night, and then they have to pay for themselves tuition. So to me, really, what excited me most was the mere fact that the informal sector that was closed in terms of the bars and in terms of the public transport and things like that is now open, and therefore our young people can be able to, do this kidogo work and be able to earn something at the end of the day. So to me, that the fact that the Wananchi can now be able to rejuvenate their livelihoods, to me, was exciting as a person.
Okay, Miriam, as a student, how does it feel knowing that now schools are open, but also having at the back of your mind the feeling that they can actually be closed next week or the other week? How does this help you? I mean, how do you balance this with your books as you read for exams, but knowing that 2 weeks from now probably they can be closed, or 1 month from now they can actually be closed again? That kind of anxiety that generates.
Okay, right now the anxiety is there. It's, I think, literally in almost all students since schools have been opened. But then we have to, like it has become the new normal, We don't know what's going to happen next year. We don't know what's going to happen this year. We don't know what's going to happen in the middle of this year. Like my comrades said, so many variants have been coming up. So we are not sure what's going to happen. But then, like our most universities have started, they during this COVID time, it taught us different ways whereby we can adjust the learning techniques. In case schools are closed, we can try doing the online teaching, so that we can continue with our studies. So I think the anxiety will remain there, but then the most important thing is how do we look for solutions that we can come out of this, because we're going to be, in the anxiety every time. It gives us the, space to also be innovative, so that we can, continue with our studies. Whether they've brought back a second lockdown, we can still continue with our studies.
Okay, May, now that the lockdown has been lifted, by and large, how does that affect your plans for 2022? Do you think that you'll be more productive? How do you become used? And then looking at that, not just from the perspective of your friends, how does that affect those within your circles?
I think with the lockdown, it's limiting definitely to be in a lockdown. And with the market opening up, there is more hope. The chances that I would choose to invest in a business or put my money into something during a lockdown are less as compared to when the market opens up. So I think people and myself as an individual would be more optimistic in venturing out, doing something. It's been like 2 years, and honestly, for me as an individual, my life, I will be honest, like my fears, my scares have been so high, health-wise, financially. Like if you're paying school fees for someone, you can't start spending that money because anytime school can open, school could close. I mean, there's been a lot of uncertainties, and with the opening up of the economy, it's like a ray of light. It gives you more hope, that better times are ahead. So I think in terms of people going out to do what they haven't done in the past few years, progressing, I think there is more hope. And I think people definitely need to go out there and move with more optimism than being more pessimistic, honestly.
Yusuf, same question. How are you going to live 2022 now that there's no more lockdown?
Yeah.
And I mean, you entered 2021 with a curfew, but you're going to enter 2022 without a curfew. It's going to be here for the next few days, and then ordinarily it should be no more. How does that affect you? How you're going to live your life? How you're going to run the office of UNSA, and all things you engage in?
Well, as a person, I'm really happy for the lifting of the lockdowns and so on and so forth. This year being a new year, and it's when everything is now going back to normal, it gives me time to work hard. And should be the very message to the youth: work hard. And also, the 2 lockdowns have taught me the importance of saving. So I'm going to maximize my savings. We are hearing new variants coming up. People, I don't know whether they're just manufacturing these variants, but you don't ever know. But so I should be ready. I should be prepared for the worst if it all happens. So I will maximize in my savings, and I should also encourage other fellows to save. Let us learn from the past and now predict and work for the future, because you don't know what might happen. Also, as a leader, a student leader of all the students in the country, I'm to go back on the ground together with my team to mobilize the students, get back to school, to mobilize the students, to embrace the SOPs, to embrace the vaccination, to go back on ground and talk to our fellows, to give them career guidance, to advise them to do whatever it takes. This is what we are intending to do as a students' organization.
Yes, Mariam?
Well, 2022, I think I'm going to continue living expecting we might have another lockdown, you know. So because for the past 2 years, you know, COVID is something that came that we weren't really prepared for. But then we have come out of it when you have learned so much. So, you know, to my fellow youth, I'm really advising them to, you know, be innovative, to work hard, because fine, when the lockdown, schools were closed, but then you also had room to, you know, be more innovative, you know, come up with skills. You can learn, you know, you can learn new skills, because you never know, maybe if you're studying law, your sector may one day in the future be affected. If you are a teacher, your sector may be affected one day. So, you know, that this lockdown has really taught us that, okay, fine, school is important, but then, you know, there are also other skills that we should at least learn how to equip ourselves with. Yeah. So I think I'm going to leave 2022 learning some new skills for a case. Yeah.
Comrade Kidega?
Yes, thank you, Godwin. To me, I think the lockdown in its, by all its measures, caused so many devastating effects to Ugandans. We know by now that because of the lockdown, the gap between the rich and the poor Ugandan was definitely wide by all its means. Because you find that the small, medium enterprises that were already choking on debt were further closed, or those that were opening found issues with accessing their workplaces and things like that. But also in terms of production as a country, our production definitely fell down because industrialization was low. And what this meant that our ordinary Ugandans, our wananchis who were working in these industrial sectors, in these farms, definitely some of them lost their jobs, but also production went low. But you see, the whole economic system is an entire ecosystem, I must say, because when production goes low, the enterprise of a country equally goes low. Therefore, there will be imbalance in terms of trade. We shall be importing too much, whereas exporting very little. And when this happens, of course, you know that we shall have very little domestic resource mobilization. When we fail to realize resources domestically, we are forced to borrow, both from our commercial banks domestically, but also from international organizations like the IMF and World Bank. When that happens, of course, our debt burden increases, and we know it's us, the Ugandan, who will feel the pinch eventually. So to me, this particular year, I look forward to us as a country being able to rejuvenate our production rates, being able to increase our exportation so that we can be able to harness more foreign exchange, and being able to realize the most revenue we can generate as a country so that we can limit our debt burden and eventually get the country on a path that is progressive economically.
Okay, so you're going to conclude. And I'm going to start with Kidega still. You're going to tell us, you're going to make your conclusions, and then you will tell us a book you're reading and a quotation from that book or something that fascinated you in that very book you're reading.
Wow, wow. Okay, well, since we are discussing economics or the economy at large, I'll quote a book by David Welch. No, actually, no, Dambisa Moyo. Dambisa Moyo is an Oxford and Harvard scholar of economics. And Dambisa Moyo one time said that
Is that a particular book?
debt burden, dead aid,
dead
rather,
aid.
dead aid. And Dambisa Moyo tells us that if African countries posed this question to themselves and said that if there was an international announcement that in the next 5 years, there shall be no more borrowing from the IMF, from the World Bank, and from any Western economy, and that African economies shall now begin to run their affairs independently, how would we receive that news as African states? So the same question that Dambisa Moyo posed in her book, to me is the same question I want us to reflect on as a people and as a country. If they said in the next 5 years, Uganda will not be able to access a loan from IMF, from World Bank, what would we do as a country? So I leave our viewers with that question as well.
Yes, Mariam.
Yes, I'm just going to paraphrase a statement by Evelyn Kasamba in her book Schoolroom of Life. She talks about the world and the different challenges that people face in the world. And then she quotes, "There is nothing new under the sun." Just like in these times we are facing the COVID pandemic, even back then in the past they were faced with a pandemic. I don't know, what was the disease in the past?
The Spanish flu,
Yes,
Ebola, so many.
yes. In fact, yeah, the Spanish flu. So when she says there's nothing new under the sun, it teaches us that what we are experiencing right now is something that happened before. But then those people relived whatever happened. They learned out of it, and they moved past it. And then you can find, in fact, you see most of those countries, the European countries that were faced with the Spanish flu, they actually developed. They try to look for solutions out of the pandemic they faced. Yeah. So I really think we should also learn from the pandemic and try to move forward, because we're going to be in lockdown, curfew every now and then, year to year.
Okay, Yusuf.
First and foremost, I request the President of the Republic of Uganda to adjust in his decision against border men, because as students we need these borders during our times of studies. Two, I also request the Minister of Works and Transport should come out real and give a serious directive to transportation companies to reduce on their transportation fares, because they are still highly charging and we as students, we may not afford this in the long run. Three, I request all my fellow students who have become mothers amid these lockdowns and those who have embraced some businesses, please come back to school and study. Don't lose hope. There is a very brighter future when you've gone to school. There's a book called How to Make Friends and Influence People. In this book, they say always accept criticism. So I will request my people who are viewing us tonight, in case you have been criticized, don't fight back. Sit, pause, reflect, and ponder over this criticism, learn from the criticism, and proceed. You may do better after the criticism.
Thank you.
Okay. So, in a nutshell, I would love to leave this with the viewers. We've been living in risky times, uncertain times, and being someone who studied actuarial science at university, we studied a lot about risk management, and we always had a tagline where we said, risk is opportunity. Even in risk, there is positivity and negativity. So regardless of the times we're going through, try and look out for how you can benefit in these situations. Before the pandemic, no one used sanitizers. Do you know how much money the sanitizers manufacturers have made during this pandemic? So look out for areas you can exploit. Do not get discouraged, but look out for those opportunities that may surface during this period and make the most out of them. I'm not currently reading a book, but I'm doing research on product development. And in that research, there is one thing that caught my attention. that it said when you're developing a product, make sure that you meet the user's need or the consumer's need, because you can take a product or an idea through the product development stage, but once it does not meet a consumer's need, you've wasted time. So in everything you do, we are youth, we are young people, we are out there to do a lot, create, innovate, and do a lot, but it's important that we understand the user's need, the consumer's need, who we are targeting. If you can understand what they need, then you're going to create something very good and will make great impact to the community. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much, our esteemed viewers. We're always grateful that you tune in and watch us every single Wednesday. We hope that you also watch the other programs and see how they go, how the discussions there go by. I hope that you learned a lot from our panel today. We shall have this same discussion next week, same station here, same time, and under the same program, the Youth Roundtable. I want to again thank the panelists that spared their time to be with us today. We are grateful that you all entered appearance today. And to you, our viewers, all we can do is wish you a very, very prosperous, healthy, and wealthy 2022. And that's it from us to you. Thank you very much.